today's video, I'm going to take you through the dress pattern Simplicity 3130. It's the dress I'm wearing. It's my all-time favorite dress. It's my all-time favorite pattern. I've made it about 5 times now, and I've gotten a little better at it every time, and I wanted to show you some of the things I've learned since I got started. How you cut your pattern pieces out is going to be determined by how wide your fabric is. The layout on the instructions are going to show you for a wider fabric than what I had. I have reworked this placket about 5 different times, and I still hate this placket, and I want to show you why. You're supposed to fold this piece to here to make a pleat. Then you sew these on, overlap them, and then stitch the back together. It's supposed to lay flat across the bottom. It does not, and you kind of have to rig it. So I've taken it apart, and I'm going to try it again a little differently. So I've already ironed this part up to give me something to hold on to. Now you have to stitch 1 inch on each corner here to give this fabric a little more sustainability. So what we're going to do, this is my pleat, and I'm supposed to have a dot, a dot, a dot, and a dot. They've worn off. So just to be sure we're putting them in the right spots, I'm going to put this back on here and remark my dots. I'm lining up with my edge over here on the side to make sure that I get this in the right place. Okay? Okay. Now, let's remark these dots. Make sure we've got it even on the edge. This placket is actually, it's the first problem you're going to run into with this dress, and you have to tackle it early on. It's literally in like step 2. So let's see if we can figure this out together. All right, the second dot goes right there. These are small dots. So this shows us where we fold and where we fold to. So this dot, you're going to stitch an L on the fabric. I'm looking for my other piece. I don't know where it went. Hold on. Okay. Let's reset our dots here too. Okay, so we have a dot here. Here. Now, this dot is down in the seam already, more or less, okay? So, and then we have this where we've stitched them together. See that? Now, what they're telling us to do is take this dot to this dot and make the pleat. See it? So we have the pleat right here, and we stitch across the pleat to hold it together. Okay, so my placket lines up with my pleat. There's my pleat, okay? Now, the easiest way I can tell you to do this placket, because it's a terrible placket, what you're going to do is you're going to fold this edge down. Now you have a seam across here, and you have this edge of this pleat. We want to make sure we cover the seam up here and line up with the edge right there. So we're going to fold this down just a little bit, okay? All right, so there, we have our edge. That's the bottom edge of our placket. Now, I'm going to use this little thing. It's my seam ripper that I spend entirely too much time with. And I'm gonna go right across here. Sometimes I use the edge of the seam ripper to manipulate the corner. Just be careful, don't cut your fabric because it's a seam ripper. It will cut your fabric if you're not careful. So I'm gonna line this up, okay, the best I can. Tuck that corner back in so it's nice and straight. Now, I'm gonna do the same thing with this one. I'm gonna line it up, okay? Now, I'm going to tuck this flap in there as well, and I'm gonna use the back side of my seam ripper to tuck it in there. Do not tear your fabric. If you have a better way to get this done, by all means, you do you. I just don't. I have a bad habit of rigging it. When I can't figure it out, I'll just do whatever I can to get the job done. So the easiest way I have found to make that work is to set it exactly where you want it, iron it really well, and that'll give you a crease so you know exactly where to sew. And then you can sew it where they tell you to, and it'll hold. Now I've got a little pucker right there that I'm not really happy about, so I'm gonna see if I can figure that out. Placket. The next thing we're gonna do is work on the back of the dress, and at the pattern piece number 5 at the very top, you'll see this section where it says pleat. So your pleat runs here, here, and here, and then you've got these notches at the top. You wanna make sure that you mark this pleat so that you know where to go. Now this pleat is gonna go to the inside of your dress. So you'll see the fold will be on the inside. So we're gonna make sure all of our notches are marked all the way around. Okay, and our dots. These dots over here on the sides are gonna show us where the pockets go. So we wanna be sure we mark them as well. Notches and dots. I don't know how you mark notches and dots. You do what works for you. I'm doing what works for me. Okay. 2 more down here at the bottom for putting that inside liner on. And make sure those are notched. Okay. So let's get the pattern off and get our pleats pinned. And then we'll stitch across the top of the pleats and sew the 2 halves of the back together. So what we have are our 3 lines here. What we're gonna do is on the inside of the dress, which is the wrong side of the fabric, we're gonna bring line to line and line to line. Okay? Line it up. So it's gonna look like this on the inside. Okay, so this, if I can get a hold of it, this is the inside of the dress. This will be the outside of the dress. See how the pleat opens up on the inside? So there you go. Folds on the outside, flat part on the inside. We'll take this over to the sewing machine and we'll just baste it at 1/4 inch across the top. And then we'll put those sides together. So I'm going to put my finger on this middle line and bring this line in and match those up and pinch it. And then we're going to take this line and do the same thing. Bring it also to that center line. And, well, now I'm making a mess out of it. We're going to pinch it together. Let's try again. Let's pinch it together. I made it sound easy, didn't I? It is. Fold and pinch. Fold and pinch. Make sure your edge across the top is nice and straight when you pin it. And it helps to give this just a little press to set it so that you're not fighting it at your machine. See how that's a little off? I want that to come right across the top. Nice and straight. Now I'm going to pin that. We'll give it just a little press and then we'll stitch it. So there we go. See? Just like that. Just hit it with a little bit of heat to set it. And we'll do the same with this other piece. Lay it out flat. Get it nice and straight. Hit it with a little heat. Set it and set it. There you go. It's ready to stitch. Okay, so now that we have our pleats basted, we want to sew the backs together. So with right sides together, we're going to line up our dots and small notches and all those things and stitch this whole back seam together. So when you line it up, the middle is what we're sewing. So my sleeve openings are back here, out of the way, lined up. We're lining up these edges here. Always run your pins horizontal. If you're stitching this way, you want your pins to go that way so that your sewing needle slides over them without you having to take them all out. But you do want to make sure that you get them in there nice and straight so that you don't break your needle. And I sew in this direction. So I'm going to run my pins so that they are pointing to the left with the heads facing right, so that if I do want to pull them out, they're facing the direction I want them to go. Now we do want this seam to stay, so we're gonna back stitch a couple of times to lock it in and then go. And we're lining up with our 5/8 line, getting it started on the edge. Back up a couple of stitches to lock it. Now we want to make sure that the edge of our fabric stays on that 5/8 and that our edges here stay together. Okay. Okay, now we can take our pins out and press the seam. To put the back yoke on the dress, we're going to put one yoke face up and backwards, okay? So this is the right side of my fabric and it's upside down from the way I'm gonna run my dress. Now I'm going to put the back of the dress on this yoke piece lining up edges and notches. It's going to go this way. And now I want another yoke piece. The back yoke is right side up. Back yoke is right side up. Fabric is right side, or back is, whoa. Yoke is right side up. Back of the dress, right side down. Second yoke, right side down on top of the edge. And we're going to pin this together so that we can go and stitch right across this back edge to put both back yokes on. Line it all up nice and straight. So now we have the yokes on the back. We're going to go sew it on. Okay, so the back of the dress has been stitched on. We're going to trim the edge down, cut some notches so that it will hang correctly. And then we're going to iron the yokes up. So what we're going to do, okay, I'm going to take my scissors, and there's my seam. I'm going to cut this in half, basically, down towards my seam. So that'll leave it at about 1/4 of an inch because we don't want all this bulk in there when we stitch it together. Don't cut your dress. Make sure you got your dress out of the way. Okay? Now, we're going to pull both yokes up and press. So according to the instructions, we're going to pin it. Now we've already done that. This is the part that we're on. It's step 13. And it says press yoke up, leaving facing down toward the back as shown. With right sides together, pin the yoke to the fronts at shoulder. Okay? So with right sides together, so I've got my dress, the back of my dress is facing up. I'm going to put right sides together, okay? Sometimes it's helpful to pin the placket shut just for a minute so that it doesn't flop around while you're trying to work with it. Okay, now we're going to line this up at the shoulder. Now, I'm only using one of the yokes. Okay, so I'm going to fold this one down out of the way. So the placket on the inside of the dress is down out of the way, and all I have is one layer to stitch to. So we're going to line it up, pin it, and sew it right across these edges that go across the top of the shoulder. Okay, we're going to do both sides, both shoulder seams. Now, stitch across the top each shoulder. Be sure not to catch this inside yoke. Remember, the inside of our dress has a yoke. we're just doing the outside, right across that top. Okay, now we're gonna do our jelly roll, which is, it's not fun, but this is what we're gonna do. See how this part is open, still hanging out there? We're gonna lay it down right there, okay? Now we're going to take the bottom of the dress and kind of fold it up, all right? Now, you're gonna start at the bottom and tightly roll it. Nice and tight and neat, okay? This top section has to be flat, but we just want to keep it nice and tight until we get up there. Okay, so we've got it rolled. Now, the front one, this one's gonna go this way, this one is gonna go this way, and we're gonna pin it. And then we're gonna stitch these sections together, okay? This way, when we flip it right side out, that inside shoulder seam is tucked away nice and neat, okay? This part can be tricky because you want to be sure that you don't get the dress caught in the seam that you're sewing. The jelly roll is a beautiful seam for the inside of the dress. It's very nice and finished, but it can be difficult to do because you have all this bulk on the inside. So you have to mash it and pull it out of the way to avoid getting it caught in your shoulder seam. Okay, so we're going to stitch this together on our seam allowance and do the other side as well. Okay, so we've got the shoulder seams stitched in. We're going to pull the pins out. Then we're going to clip that seam so that it's not so bulky. And we have to flip the dress right side out. Please don't lose patience at trying to flip it. It's not exactly easy to do. So we're going to trim this seam. Once again, make sure that you did not get your dress caught in your seam before you start cutting, because you're not going to want to cut your dress, and that would be terrible. Okay, now the directions make it sound so simple to just reach in this little hole and pull your dress out. It's just not. So I pull it out through the neckline. Just be sure you don't warp it. Don't pull it too hard. It comes out a lot easier. Now, what you're gonna do when you flip this right side out, you'll see that your seams, your shoulder seam is hidden. So now you have this nice finished edge. See? Nice finished edge. Now go ahead and take that pin out that you put to hold the placket together. And this is what we have so far. Okay, that's the front. Here's the back. Coming along. Let's do, now they're telling us to do the collar. So we stitched across there at 5/8, which is our seam allowance, and it gave us a pressing guide. Now we're going to go through and trim this and clip it before we sew the two pieces together. Notice the curve, that's where your notches are. This is the curve, and we're going to do it right sides together like that. So we've sewed the collar on according to the directions. So essentially, we put the right sides together, we sewed it down this way, folded over, and sewed back. Sometimes it's kind of hard sewing in the ditch and catching this little edge up front. It's okay if you sew it this way and just stay really close to that edge, because the underneath really doesn't show. See that? The collar's going to be out like this. What you want to make sure of is that you get nice clean edges on here, at least back about 3 inches on both sides, because that shows. Okay, so now we're going to stitch our side seams together. And I've already sewed the pockets on according to the directions. So we did a seam across here with right sides together. Now we're going to sew the side seams. And what we're going to do, we're going to take these pockets and pull them out and line them up. Okay? So it's going to line up just like that. We're going to sew from the arm seam around this curve and all the way down, stopping at our small dots down at the bottom, which will give us a split that's about 5 inches up. Okay, and we're doing our good old standard 5/8 seam allowance. Line it up, put it on there, back stitch a couple of steps just to lock it in. Now we're gonna guide our fabric along that 5/8 line, right around that curve, just like that. Now when you get down here to these pockets, you want to make sure that they're lined up correctly and that your fabric, your edges are lined up correctly. I encourage you to pin this. I'm not, but it's a great idea. Make sure your edges of your fabric line up together. Keep those edges nice and straight. Now the pattern instructions have you stopping at the top and bottom of the pocket and sewing the pocket up separately. I personally didn't want to have to do that. So I make sure that it's all lined up, and then I sew down just a little ways past the pocket. I set my needle so that it stays down, and then I'm going to raise my presser foot and turn my dress. And again, we're making sure that we stay lined up on that 5/8 mark. Okay, so we're going to stay on that 5/8 edge all the way around the pocket and back down to the dress. This is just faster. Make sure you have your dot marked down here at the bottom so you know where to stop this seam. And we stop because we're actually going to be adding a lining so that the underneath looks finished and doesn't show raw fabric. Now I'm going to clip to make sure that my threads stay nice and neat. We pressed the seam. Okay, so the sleeve insert is a long rectangle. We sew those edges together, the shorter edges together, trim it, press it flat, and then we're just going to fold it in half so that the stabilizer, or whatever you want to call that stuff, stays to the inside. And we're going to line these edges up and then press it flat. Once we get this lined up and flat like it's supposed to be, we're going to stick it inside the sleeve hole and stitch it. Okay? Now, I've got the seam lined up and even. I'm going to go up here to the armhole and I'm going to line it up with the side seam right here. Okay, so there's the side seam. Here's the seam in my sleeve. Right sides together. We're gonna line those up and then we're gonna pin it. Okay? I heard all of you collectively say, okay. All right, now let's tuck this sleeve band inside the dress. Now I like to line everything up by putting pressure here, pinching that side seam, and then just push out and it pops everything in place like that. Now I want to make sure that this edge and that edge line up straight. So I'm going to go all the way around this armhole and just put a pin or two to make sure it's correct. So I'm lining my edges of my fabric up, my sleeve that's on my dress, and both of these seams, both of the selvage edges of the sleeve cuff. Everything should line up nice and neat and even. Okay? Just like that. I'm going to slide it over the end and line it up with that 5/8 seam allowance. If you have these little threads in the way, go on and clip them so that they don't create tangles later. Okay, so we're going to stick it right up here to our seam allowance. Remember, if we're sewing straight this way and our pins are in horizontally, then they don't get stuck and they don't break a needle. You want to make sure you get your pins in there right. Now I'm going to keep a little tension at the bottom to help pull it through and make sure that it stays flat. So I've got a little bit of tension down here at the bottom, not too tight because we don't want to pull it. Now I'm going to back stitch to lock it and go. And we're back to where we started. We want to back stitch a couple of stitches and then pull it out. Now, with this edge, what we want to do is trim it, and then I like to go over it with a zigzag just to help finish that edge off and reinforce it a little bit. So I'm going to clip this seam allowance back down to about 1/4 inch. Be careful, don't clip your seam that you just sewed. Watch what you're doing. And this is kind of thick, so this is where you're going to want to be sure you've got those good scissors or a good rotary tool. Now, if you had a serger, that would be a great edge to finish off with a serge. But I'm just going to use a zigzag and I'm going to widen it a little bit. Now, I'm going to go right back around that same seam, but in order to keep from getting into my seam allowance that my seam I already have here, my presser foot, I'm going to keep the seam I just made to the outside, just to the edge right here, so that it goes up to it, but not over it. So you'll notice there's like a gap between these two. I'm feeding this line to the inside of this side of the presser foot. I hope that makes sense. So we've sewn around both sleeves, right? If I can find them. Oop, there's some more threads. Okay, so we've sewn both sleeves. There they are. And then when we turn the dress right side out, they show up just like that. There's your sleeve. Now, let's work on the lining that goes around the bottom. Okay, so this is the bottom edge of the dress that goes on the inside. You've got your open sides in the front and back, okay? So on the inside of this dress, start on the corner, on the side. We're gonna match it up and pin it. Okay? Right sides together. I think. In. You will see what I mean. So line these up. Watch your dots and notches. And stitch. You're gonna stitch down and across the bottom edge and up the side and stop, and then do the same thing for the back. Down, across, and up, and stop. Don't sew across the corner up here. Okay. This is what it looks like. Okay? Let's clip these threads. We're also going to trim this seam and clip the corner. So you're going to clip the corner at a diagonal so that it comes out sharp. We're going to cut this seam down to about half of what it is. Honestly, this is faster with a rotary tool. Okay, so we've trimmed it down about halfway. Now we're going to turn it inside out. Press those corners out. I guess we're turning it right side out, aren't we? Okay. Now, that's the bottom of your dress. That's the inside of the bottom of your dress. This is the back. Okay, this is the front of the dress. This is the inside, that's the outside. We're gonna turn it back, right side out, press those corners out good. Now use your iron and press that edge so that it pops nice and clean, and then we're gonna come back and stitch the top of that pretty hem we just made. So you're gonna go to your iron and you're gonna grab this edge, pull it out nice and straight, and press it, and then we're gonna stitch across here to sew this edge down. Okay, these corners right here where we didn't sew, we're going to tuck them in and stitch them across. So you tuck it like that. Okay, now we're gonna just try and lay this flat, and you've got your lap full of a huge puddle of fabric. So you're gonna try and pull this as straight as possible. You're gonna stay as close to that edge as you can. Now the pattern instructions are gonna tell you just top stitch, and if you're comfortable with that, let her roll. I'm not, so I'm just gonna stay right across the edge and go. And we're gonna go all the way around. Okay, so here's the dress. And it's not perfect because, well, it's just not, but nobody's gonna know what's wrong with it but me. The pockets work great. They line up and they're stitched in well. And then we've got the bottom finished edge. So, okay. Y'all be sweet.